Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, January 13th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. In Fresno, a city law requires city council approval of large government contracts. But what happens when consultants receive smaller contracts over and over again?
And at the core of it, this policy allows city council members and also the Fresno city manager to ink contracts with little to no oversight.
Later in the show, Fresnoland reporter Omar Rashad discusses his latest investigation into city contracts and transparency. But first, these headlines. Fresno County health officials are reporting their first flu-related death of the year. They say the death comes as cases of the flu are continuing to rise in the Central Valley. 15 people in the state have died from the flu since the start of the year, including 2 children. Valley emergency rooms have also been impacted by a surge of patients in recent weeks. Health officials are asking everyone to consider getting a seasonal flu shot, especially those who are at higher risk of illness. In addition to vaccination, people are asked to stay home if they're sick and to keep up with hand washing and face covering when needed. Dr. Mehmet Oz was in Bakersfield this weekend. The head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services held a healthcare roundtable with Republican Congressman David Valadao and Vince Fong. Both represent parts of Kern County. The discussion centered around healthcare challenges facing the Central Valley. The officials also toured Kern Medical. Dr. Oz's visit was part of the federal government's efforts to get a look at areas in need of healthcare funding. Inmates at a Valley prison are taking regular trips to far-flung exotic locales, such as Thailand. No passport is required for these trips because, as KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado tells us, it's all done using virtual reality technology.
The technology at Valley State Prison is provided by the Los Angeles-based nonprofit Creative Acts. It considers itself a, quote, social justice arts organization. The goal isn't to just give incarcerated people a brief escape, but also expose them to real-world scenarios and prepare them to re-enter society. Experiences include exotic sites on the other side of the world, as well as more practical scenarios like job interviews. Jacob Smith has spent decades in prison. He said the technology shows how much the world has changed.
Once I got the hang of everything, moving the controllers, I guess you have 2 controllers you move around. It has a beam, and you point at the content, and they'll play it for you, and you get to visualize what's happening out there. And it's total 360. You're totally somewhere else.
Experts agree this technology isn't just about having fun. It can play an important role in rehabilitation. Separate research around the use of technology within prisons shows even short nature videos can reduce levels of aggression among those incarcerated. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
State community college leaders are set to discuss a controversial item at their meeting today. Our newsroom partner EdSource reports the agenda includes a discussion item on offering bachelor's degrees through community colleges. State law allows community colleges to offer bachelor's degrees if there's a workforce need and they don't duplicate offerings at state universities. But past proposals have encountered strong pushback from the CSU system.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Fresno State, providing short courses and activities for everyone 50 and better. Spring semester registration begins January 14th. More info available at fresnostate.edu/OLLI. The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, where learning never ends.
And now to our main story. 2 years ago, the Fresno City Council approved a seemingly innocuous rule. Only those government contracts worth more than $100,000 would require City Council approval. Previously, the limit had been half that. Now, Fresno has a multi-billion-dollar budget, billion with a B, so this rule may not seem like a big deal. That is, until our news partner Fresnoland uncovered it's been a boon to certain local consultants, including one who has been paid $500,000 over the span of 5 years. And keep in mind, this is all taxpayer money. Omar Rashad's investigation caused quite a stir in Fresno's political circles, and he joins me today to discuss his reporting. He starts the conversation by explaining how he discovered that these city contracts have been flying under the radar without much oversight.
So I did the painstaking work of going through the city of Fresno's contracts database, which means I went through more than 3,500 contracts between the city and third-party companies. I found that city leaders have regularly handed out contracts to consultants worth $100,000 or less. And since they don't go over that threshold, they don't have to go before the Fresno City Council for approval, and they're effectively undisclosed to the public. And what I found was at least a dozen instances in which one consultant got several under-threshold contracts in a single fiscal year, the sum of which is greater than that threshold, $100,000. And essentially, since these are worth less than or equal to $100,000, they're essentially exempt from council approval. One example, I'll just say the biggest example, was one consultant that received 19 contracts worth $100,000 or less between 2020 and 2025. And this is a civil and structural engineering consultant that the city uses a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so there's no limit on the number of contracts you can receive as long as they're under the threshold.
Yes, and that's why one council member I quoted in my story called that a loophole, essentially. Should city policy expressly bar several of these under-threshold contracts with the same consultant in a single fiscal year?
So in June of 2024, the council changed that threshold for when these contracts needed city council approval. Before it was changed, it was $50,000 was that limit that it needed council approval. Now it's gone up to $100,000. So why was raising that threshold for contracts significant?
Yeah, it's significant because, first off, council members did this quietly. They actually approved doubling that threshold to $100K without any public discussion the same day they approved a $2 billion budget in June 2024. And at the core of it, this policy allows city council members and also the Fresno city manager to ink contracts with little to no oversight. I do want to say that, this policy was created in the name of government efficiency. Does every small dollar contract need to go to the city council for approval? And just for listeners, the city council meets only twice a month. So theoretically, that could maybe make some processes at the city take longer. But I think at the core of my investigation is focusing on the lack of oversight of these funds and how many of these under-threshold contracts can be given out.
Yeah, in my research for this article, the city has a more than $2 billion budget. So I could see the argument that, hey, $100,000, we got to raise this threshold. We're doing a lot of business here.
Yep.
But from another perspective, that is a lot of money to be on the receiving end of, especially if it's multiple contracts. So that's sort of the nitty gritty of what you're looking into here, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So your recent reporting partially focused on multiple below $100,000 contracts between then Fresno City Council member Luis Chavez, who's now a Fresno County supervisor, and a political consultant he used, Alex Tavlian. So tell us more about those contracts and why they raised eyebrows for you.
Yeah, so Luis Chavez, before he was a Fresno County supervisor, he spent 8 years on the Fresno City Council. And while he was there, he inked 7 contracts with a company called Local Government Strategic Consulting. That company is run by political consultant Alex Tavlian. And he ended up, his consulting company ended up making more than $300,000 doing PR and advertisements for Chavez's council office over the years. And at one point in 2024, Chavez was paying Tavlian's consulting company more than $16K a month just on constituent outreach. And I just want to flag that monthly rate is $200,000 annually. And additionally, on top of that $16K a month, Chavez paid Tavlian's company more than $31,000 for Facebook ads, while Chavez was simultaneously running for county office during the November 2024 election. That county seat is the one that Chavez currently occupies.
That just seems like an exorbitant amount of money for a city council member. Am I wrong? Do we have context?
Yeah, I don't. You wouldn't have to look too hard to find a City Hall insider who tells you that's a lot of money. Okay. And I will say, since publishing this investigation, I've gotten a lot of feedback that this is the reporting we need in Fresno. We need to know how these public dollars are being spent. And I've gotten a lot of shocked reactions from folks in City Hall.
Yeah, these are taxpayer dollars, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
I do want to discuss Alex Tavlian a little bit more. It seems like so many stories in the last year have circled back to him. I thought you could give listeners who aren't familiar with Alex Tavlian just a quick overview. What's his connection to the Fresno City Council and sort of involvement in this space?
Absolutely. That's really important, context. He's a political consultant. Alex Tavlian has run the political campaigns of Mike Kerbasi, Gary Bredefeld, and he even worked on Mayor Jerry Dyer's campaign for mayor in 2020. To my knowledge, a PAC run by him is currently being investigated by the FPPC. This is California's state watchdog for campaign finance and politics. And this PAC that Tavlian was responsible for sending out disparaging mailers attacking Brandon Vang when he was running for Council District 5 in that March 2025 special election.
Yeah, I remember that. Tavlian's consulting firm received many of these contracts, which we've discussed, and they didn't get approval from the city council because they were under that $100,000 threshold. So just how much collectively has Tavlian received over recent years? Do we know?
Yeah, so it actually took 8 months for me to get documents and invoices and payment records that shows that the city of Fresno has paid Alex Tavlian's consulting company more than $500,000. The exact amount is $557,572.85. And this is specifically between January 2020 and January 2025.
Wow. Were there any other contracts or consultants who benefited to the same degree?
So I will say that I haven't found a single council member other than former council member Luis Chavez who regularly contracted with a consultant, went over the city's threshold for contracts exempt from council approval. Essentially, Chavez's relationship with this consultant was something I couldn't find for any other council member for the last 5 years.
I want to note that since you published your reporting, there have been calls for changes to these city contracts that are given out. So what are some council members calling for, and how soon could some of those changes be coming?
Yeah. So I'm not clear on timeline. But I will say hours after we published part 1 of the investigation, 2 city council members hosted a press conference saying they'd be championing transparency reforms and accountability reforms moving forward. Now, it's unclear what exactly that's going to look like. I've yet to see a specific policy drafted up, but I think it's clear, on top of the fact that 5 council members told me that reform is needed on transparency. 2 of those council members hosted a press conference to just drive that point home for the public, and that received a lot of attention, I will say.
Yeah, certainly. Before I let you go, Omar, I did want to ask about Fresno County Supervisor Luis Chavez. Has he responded to your reporting? Because he's a pretty central figure in this investigation. And does this raise questions about some of his political activities at large, or frankly, political activities in City Hall?
Well, first off, he refused to comment for my investigation, and I reached out several times, and he's known that I've been working on this story since at least September of last year. So it's been months. But after the investigation was published, he spoke to me in a phone call, and I asked him most of the questions I had. And we actually just published a follow-up this week, which I highly encourage listeners to take a look at. And in it, he says he didn't do anything unusual. He said it's okay for a sitting council member to use $30,000 of taxpayer dollars while running for office on the county level. He also said that he had no idea that the total amount that he paid this consultant for constituent outreach was $99,999.99. And you could only imagine my reaction as a reporter who's like deep in an Excel spreadsheet totaling up invoices and payments. But I think to hear that he also didn't know, or that was never something that he discussed with Alex Tavlian's consulting company, was definitely surprising to me.
Fresnoland investigative reporter Omar Rashad, thank you so much for your time and for breaking down this investigation for us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
How does AI even work? Where does creativity come from? What's the secret to living longer? TED Radio Hour explores the biggest questions with some of the world's greatest thinkers. They will surprise, challenge, and even change you. Listen to NPR's TED Radio Hour wherever you get your podcasts.